Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Well, today we're continuing our ongoing coverage of the war between the Russian Federation and Ukraine. And forgive me, I am still sipping on my fine cup of coffee this morning. I'll take another sip here. Coffee is just awesome if you're a coffee connoisseur. So back to the program. The United States Secretary of State, Tony Blinken, was in Kiev recently. He may still be there. He may have departed. Difficult to say. We have a picture of him at a local Kiev establishment, and he is on the guitar. He plays in a band, obviously, and he's singing "Rocking in the Free World." Rocking in the Free World. Now, the Ukraine has not had an election since 2019. The Russians just had an election in March. And whatever the West feels about Vladimir Putin, the most of the Russian population very much likes having Vladimir Putin running the country. But in the Ukraine, there hasn't been elections in about 5 years. The last set of elections were canceled. And let's get off of this picture. All right. Now, additionally, the Republic of Estonia. Let's go to the other map where we can look quickly at Estonia. Here's Estonia. Estonia has a very small population. It has a military capacity. I believe it has about 4,000 active personnel in its army, and can call up about 37,000 reserves. Now, these are not ready reserves. And obviously, it is a member of NATO, so there are North Atlantic Treaty Organization assets in the country as well. But it borders the Russian Federation. And Estonia right now is talking about sending troops to the Ukraine. Now, initially, these troops would be rear area forces designed to train and equip the Ukrainian military. The Estonian land forces, one of their armored vehicles that they use, the CV-90, very effective armored vehicle, has a 30 millimeter autocannon. I'll bring that up here real quick. The Estonians have a battalion set of these, and they're also ordering CV-90s without the turret. They just have the hull, and then it'll have a remote weapon system on it that's able to fire an anti-tank guided weapon system. So very effective vehicle. But they have a very, very tiny military. 4,000 personnel, 2 brigade sets. One is a mechanized brigade that is equipped with these CV-90s and other armored vehicles. No heavy combat tanks. And then the other brigade set, the 2nd brigade. So you have the 1st brigade, and then you have the 2nd brigade. 1st brigade, mechanized infantry. 2nd brigade, light infantry. With 1 active infantry battalion in that 2nd brigade. The other 2 brigades are ready reserve formations. So essentially they have 6 maneuver battalions. 6 maneuver battalions. And here is Estonia antagonizing the Russian Federation. Here's another picture of Estonian troops training with U.S. Bradley armored infantry fighting vehicles. in Estonia. And there may be a U.S. combat battalion there. I'd have to do some research on that to find out. But obviously there is some NATO assets there. But immediately, as I've talked about in the past, because Estonia is a member of NATO, it's probably perceived as having more capability than it really does. Look, the Russians would march over Estonia in a matter of days. They would probably avoid many of the cities. They would besiege the cities. They would shell the cities. But the Russian army is so much bigger and so much more capable, and obviously it has an air force. Now, the challenge for the Russians would be the immediate introduction of NATO air assets to try and assist the Estonians. The only problem with that is you would have to use low observable aircraft, most likely United States F-35s, F-22s, would have to be brought into the fray, because the Russians would deploy and have deployed S-400 long-range surface-to-air missile systems in this area. From Russian territory, the Russians have the ability of locking down all three Baltic states' airspace with air defense missiles, and they would do that. So it would be very difficult for NATO to fly over Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. It would be challenging for the NATO alliance to operate in the Baltic Sea because of the long range of both Russian anti-ship weapon systems and the air defense systems that the Russians have. So this 6,000, 4,000, 6,000-ish military right now who is antagonizing Russia by saying they're going to send troops into a war zone that Russia is engaged with right now, which is Ukraine. When Estonia should really look at protecting its own border. So if the Estonians move troops in to assist the Ukraine, does that make Estonia an active participant in this war? And if Estonia becomes an active participant by injecting troops into Western Ukraine, does that give the Russians the right to move troops into Estonia? Now look, there are areas of Estonia with Russian majority population. Narva, here in northeastern Estonia, is predominantly Russian. Now, we don't know where those Russians living in northeastern Estonia, we don't know where their sympathies lie. But it would be a great pretext for the Russians to move into Estonia, especially if Estonia puts forces in Ukraine and become involved in this conflict. The Estonians don't have an air force. As I've talked about before, they don't really have any main battle tanks. They are really incapable of defending themselves against an all-out Russian attack. So again, they have the 44 CV-90s, 37 of the Hall support variants of the CV-90s. They have 136 Patria, which are armored vehicles. They have 130 Otokar 6x6, which are Turkish-made light armored vehicles. And that is essentially their force. They also possess a battalion set of South Korean K9 Thunder heavy artillery, and they have 6 U.S.-made HIMARS. 6 U.S.-made HIMARS. But the Russians would move so quickly into Estonia, they would overrun and they would seize a lot of that equipment. So it's, again, very interesting to see what Estonia is doing and saying. And then you have to ask yourself the question, why is it doing this? Is it in its best interest to do this? Or is it something that NATO would like Estonia to do? Does NATO, does the United States feel that the Ukrainian military is on the verge of collapse? And the only way to save it, after giving it hundreds of billions of dollars and massive amounts of armaments to defend itself, which appear to have been a failure, are they looking at intervening? They, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Well, if Estonia moves troops in, if France moves troops in to western Ukraine, undoubtedly the Russians are going to hit those targets, either by accident or on purpose. Look, the Ukraine is not a member state of NATO. It's not a member. NATO was designed to protect NATO members. So if Estonia moves troops into a non-member nation state that is at war and then is attacked either in that host country, Ukraine, or if the Russians feel that, okay, well, you have essentially placed yourself in this conflict and we now feel that we can move into Estonia. Now, is that likely? Probably not at this point. But if escalation occurs, targets are hit in western Ukraine, and there's a possible NATO response, it's like walking up a staircase. Troops are moved into a certain area. NATO decides to start shooting down Russian missiles, and then we're off to the races. That's what happens. In the east, the Russians continue operations. Let's go back over to the deep state map. And this is now finally showing that Russian troops have entered Volchansk. They're in the city, and they continue offensive operations in these two areas. We're continuing to watch the massing of approximately 10,000 Russian troops to the north-northeast of Sumy as well. So in total, the Russians had between 50 and 70,000 troops, about 400 main battle tanks, 900 armored vehicles, essentially 2 to 3 reinforced corps operating in the Belgorod and Kursk oblasts. And we can expect that the Russians are going to widen operations in this area. We believe that's going to happen very soon. So we're going to continue to watch what is happening in this area. We're going to continue to watch what is happening with the Estonians and obviously the French. And as this continues to spiral out of control until we are in a global war. More to come very soon, as always. Thanks for joining us. Have a good day.